everyone, my name is Lindsay Davis, and today I will be talking about what do Seattle-based newspapers tell the public about the Seattle Police Department. So we're going to be talking about how um, our newspapers here in Seattle are giving off a portrayal of our Seattle Police Department and how this is kind of influencing the Seattle public's view of our law enforcement. So our public perception of criminals, deviants, our own police officers, etc., are really being influenced by the talk about in the media. So in this research project, I'm specifically looking into Seattle-based newspapers and trying to find patterns of how the media shapes the way our Seattle public views our Seattle Police Department. So that leads me into the methods. So the sample that I chose were from the Stranger articles and the Seattle Times articles, which are obviously both two Seattle-based newspapers. So I went into both websites and found the archives, and I put in specific search terms, Seattle police and crime, with a range of dates of just 2017. The reason why I chose 2017 was because I wanted it to be the most recent stories with the most recent information because, excuse me, the perceptions may have changed over the years, and I want the most recent. So after that, I found 33 articles from The Stranger and 57 articles from the Seattle Times. And so I wrote 1 through 33 and then 1 through 57 and then put them into piles and chose 10 from each pile. So all in all, I underwent content analysis of 20 articles. So then I had to choose my measures, and my measures were fear and worry of crime, and then also police effectiveness based on the attitudes. So in order to gauge the fear and worry of crime, I decided to break it down into types of crime. So violent crimes such as mugging, knifing, shooting, things that are done on force as a means of an end were violent crimes, and hate crimes were any crimes motivated by any type of prejudice, gender, racial, etc. The reasons why I chose these crime is because based on the information and my literature review, that these types of crimes produce fear into people. And with fear, you're also going to have a different type of view of what is supposed to protect you. So, other than the fear and worry of crime, my other measure was attitudes towards police effectiveness. I made a table with columns of what constituted attitudes. So I will read these off. My table columns were sense of approval of punishment, sense of approval of use of force, and then sense of disapproval of both of these things, and then marked any sort of misconduct involving race or gender. And then also the last two columns were sense of positive community and then sense of negative community relationship with the police. And the reason why community is so important is because the police are a part of this, of Seattle, and so are we, and they're supposed to be protecting us. So a community relationship is really important to have. So the procedure for the content analysis, I personally trained another independent coder. I taught them how to use my rubric, what I was looking for. We decided on the specific terms of what constituted as what. In regards to fear and worry of crime, we wrote down how many articles reported on violent or hate crimes and what the specific crime was so we could come back in case we had any disagreements. And then in the attitudes towards police effectiveness, we wrote down yes or no, if it was approving or disapproving. And I realized that sense of approval and sense of disapproval is kind of hard up in the air. How do you know that you're in correspondence with your other coder? So we decided that articles that kind of swayed as a way of criticizing or kind of skeptical of police efforts and their motives and how they dealt with a certain crime was going to be disapproval. And then also the community, in the community sense, if things happen such as gender or race prejudices, that was obviously going to be a negative sense of community. And then if the article kind of had a sense of approval of punishment, kind of swayed to be like, oh, okay, the police are getting better, that was approval. So the results were as followed. The fear and worry of crime, The Stranger and the Seattle Times both talked a lot about violent crimes, a lot of knifing and shooting and mugging, and there were 3 out of the 20 articles talking about just blatant murder. So these are crimes that are producing fear into people. So clearly, um, their public perception of the law enforcement might be skewed because of the fact that these violent crimes are occurring all the time. And then also there were a significant amount of racial misconduct incidents that the police did that were written about as well. When it came to police effectiveness, the table showed that the Stranger had a lot more negative articles than the Seattle Times. They had 6 out of 10 articles talking about a negative sense of community, while the Seattle Times only had 4. However, when it came to race, it was 4 and 4 out of 10. And then also a sense of disapproval was 4 and 3 as well. So they differ in the fact that the Seattle Times had a little bit more positive and approving things to say about the police, however, still negative enough to kind of find a pattern. This leads me into the discussion. So, in regards to fear and worry of crime, the study reveals that the newspaper articles published in the Seattle report on a lot of stories of violent crimes, meaning that the Seattle neighborhoods have a lot of violent crimes occurring, and this is obviously going to make a change in the way that they perceive law enforcement. This is because these are dangerous crimes that can happen to them, can happen to others in their community, and it's going to kind of force people to consider whether their law enforcement are doing what they're supposed to do in order to keep these people safe. And then in regards to hate crimes, they're involving race a lot. This could be due to the fact that Seattle is kind of a melting pot of races, and so the Seattle residents kind of have this expectation of acceptance and unity, and if the police department is continuing to show misconduct based on race, it's going to definitely put out a negative sense of their law enforcement in their eyes. In regards to police effectiveness, the study reveals that the Stranger had a significant lower rate of approval, while the Seattle Times had more rates of approval. However, even when they talked about approval, it was more as though the Seattle Police Department had to undergo this reform, that they've been getting better, however, still are showing, obviously, a lot of crimes and also a lot of racial issues. So this leads me into my discussion, my conclusion, Seattle-based newspapers in Seattle portray a higher fear of crime and worry with violent crimes such as knifing and shooting, which is resulting in a negative sense of community relationships with the police. This also reveals that the law enforcement are based on whether someone feels safe where they live, and if these violent crimes keep occurring, then they're not going to feel safe. Thus, they're going to have a negative sense and not believe that their local police are adequate. Next, the Seattle-based newspapers in Seattle portray a sense of disapproval of the police use of force, which are also resulting in negative perceptions and a negative sense of community within their specific neighborhood. And then when locals, believe that their police are using punishment that doesn't really match the crime, they're going to be worried if they're going to fall victim to this, or they may believe that they may have a negative sense of their police department because they believe that the police are using a kind of abuse of power. And then lastly, Seattle-based newspapers portray Seattle law enforcement using inadequate use of force and misconduct based on race, thus resulting in a higher fear and worry of crime. Also, when locals believe that their law enforcement are prejudiced towards race, they may feel a broken sense of their relationship and their protectors. Seattle is known, like I said, for acceptance, and residents may feel that their local police department are not engaging in the same practices that they want them to. I think in any study, it's important to talk about limitations. For this, obviously, I think that more mediums would be needed to find more opinions and perspectives, not just newspapers, magazines, television, news transcripts, things like that. Also, I think that the specific search terms that I put into the archives, obviously I'm going to get completely different articles, whether I put in Seattle police and crime or Seattle police and race or, so on. And then also I think that because Seattle has so many different ethnicities, the fact that I'm only finding English and American written newspapers, that this may be also kind of not getting different opinions and perspectives simply because I can't understand and read them. So these were my methods, my discussion, and my conclusions. I hope you enjoyed it. All in all, I think that the police have the public has a negative sense of a view of their local police department due to the fact that a lot of racial misconduct is happening, a lot of violent crimes are occurring, and maybe that they're not going to have a perfect view of their law enforcement and that they're doing their job.